The dead don't speak. That's what I believed for 43 years of my life, until I watched a corpse sit up on an embalming table, turn its gray face toward the camera, and whisper my home address. Not just the street, the apartment number, the exact words my grandmother used to describe the crooked oak tree in the front yard before she died. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how I found those tapes in the first place. My name is Marcus Chen, and in September of 2019, I inherited my Uncle Bernard's funeral home in Millbrook, Ohio. You've probably never heard of Millbrook. It's one of those forgotten towns that Google Maps sometimes glitches over. A place where the population sign hasn't been updated since 1987, and the only restaurant is a diner that closes at 6 because nobody stays out after dark anyway. Bernard's Eternal Rest funeral services sat at the edge of town, a Victorian-era house converted in 1952, all peeling white paint and windows that seemed to watch you from impossible angles. I hadn't spoken to Bernard in 11 years. Family drama, the usual poison that seeps between relatives over time. So when his lawyer called me to say I'd inherited everything, I assumed it was some kind of mistake or maybe a final cruel joke from a man I remembered as cold, meticulous, and deeply unsettling even at family gatherings. Bernard never smiled with his eyes. He'd watch you across the Thanksgiving table like he was already measuring you for a casket. The lawyer, a nervous man named Howard Peskett, handed me a single key and a handwritten note sealed with actual wax. I remember the color of that wax. Deep burgundy, almost black, like old blood. The note contained 3 sentences in Bernard's cramped handwriting. The filing cabinet in the basement. Bottom drawer. Watch them in order, and you'll understand why I chose you. I arrived at the funeral home on September 14th. The drive from Columbus took 3 hours longer than it should have because my GPS kept rerouting me through roads that didn't exist on any physical map. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway at 7:47 p.m., the sun had already bled out below the horizon, leaving the sky the color of a fresh bruise. The smell hit me first. Every funeral home has a particular scent, that strange cocktail of formaldehyde, flowers, and the underlying sweetness that no amount of chemicals can fully mask. But Bernard's place had something else beneath it all. Something older, like wet earth and copper and the faintest trace of smoke. The electricity still worked, thank God, though the lights flickered in a rhythm that felt almost intentional. I found the basement door in the kitchen, hidden behind a shelf of cleaning supplies that hadn't been touched in years. The stairs descended further than they should have, at least 20 steps into darkness that my phone flashlight couldn't fully penetrate. The filing cabinet sat exactly where Bernard said it would be. Industrial gray metal, for drawers, the kind you'd find in any office building in America. But the bottom drawer had a different lock than the others. Heavier. The key Bernard left me fit perfectly. Inside I found VHS tapes. Dozens of them, maybe 60 or 70, each labeled with a name and a date written in Bernard's obsessive script. The earliest tape was dated March 3, 1989. The most recent was September 2, 2019. 12 days before Bernard died. The name on that last tape made my blood stop moving in my veins. It was my name, Marcus Chen. September 2, 2019. I hadn't seen Bernard in over a decade. I wasn't dead. I had never been to this funeral home in my life. Yet there was my name in his handwriting on a tape labeled like all the others. A television and VCR sat in the corner of the basement, covered in dust so thick it looked like gray fur. The setup felt deliberate, like Bernard knew someone would come down here eventually. Like he'd been waiting. I should have left. I should have driven back to Columbus, sold the property to the first buyer, and never thought about Millbrook again. But Bernard knew something about me that I've never admitted to anyone. I can't resist a locked door. I can't walk away from a secret. I started with the first tape. The footage opened on the embalming room upstairs, a space I'd briefly glimpsed through a doorway on my way to the kitchen. Bernard appeared younger here, maybe mid-40s. His hair still dark and his posture rigid with the same unsettling precision I remembered. He stood beside a stainless steel table where a body lay covered with a white sheet. March 3, 1989, Bernard said directly into the camera. His voice was flat, clinical. Subject is Eleanor Vance, Deceased February 28th. Age 72. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest, though the family suspects otherwise. They always suspect otherwise. He pulled back the sheet to reveal an elderly woman with paper-thin skin and closed eyes. Nothing unusual. Nothing frightening. Bernard proceeded to document his embalming process with the detached professionalism of a mechanic changing oil. He discussed the arterial injection, the cavity treatment, the setting of features. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then Eleanor Vance opened her eyes. I wish I could tell you I imagined it. I wish I could tell you the tape was damaged or Bernard had edited it somehow. But I watched that dead woman's eyelids flutter, then rise, revealing pupils that had already begun to cloud with the film of death. Bernard didn't react. He kept narrating, kept working, as if a corpse staring at the ceiling was perfectly normal. She's been trying to speak for the last 3 hours, Bernard said calmly. They always try to speak. The vocal cords are the last thing to truly die, you see. The brain stops, the heart stops, but something keeps trying to push air through the throat. Something that isn't quite ready to leave. Eleanor's mouth opened. A sound emerged from the speakers of that ancient television. A sound I will hear in my nightmares until the day I become a subject in someone else's video diary. It wasn't words exactly. It was more like static shaped into syllables, like a radio trying to tune into a frequency that shouldn't exist. She's saying a name, Bernard continued. They always say a name. Someone they need to warn, usually. Someone who will join them soon. The tape ended there. I sat in that basement for a long time, my hands shaking so badly I could barely eject the cassette. Logic told me it was fake. A practical effect. A prank. Bernard's sick sense of humor reaching beyond the grave. But something deeper than logic whispered that I had just witnessed something true. I watched the second tape. Then the third. Then 10 more, each one documenting a different body. A different moment when the dead remembered how to move. Some of them only twitched. Others sat up completely. One woman, deceased from a car accident in 1997, climbed off the table and walked 3 steps toward the camera before collapsing. And they all spoke. Every single one of them. By tape number 34, I noticed the pattern. The names they whispered, those fragments of static that Bernard always seemed to understand, they corresponded to future tapes. The body from 1995 spoke the name of someone who died in 2001. The body from 2003 whispered about a death that wouldn't happen until 2011. The dead were predicting the dead. I finally reached for the tape with my name on it. The footage opened on the same embalming room, but something was different. The lights were dimmer. Bernard looked ancient, his hands trembling as he adjusted the camera. Behind him, the table was empty. Marcus, he said, looking directly into the lens. If you're watching this, I'm already gone. I've spent 30 years documenting what happens in this room, trying to understand the mechanism, the purpose. I failed. But last night something changed. A body came in, a young man who drowned in Miller's Pond, and when he opened his mouth, he didn't whisper a name. He whispered instructions. Bernard leaned closer to the camera. His eyes were wrong somehow, too wide, the pupils dilated beyond what the dim lighting required. He told me where to find you. He told me what you are. He told me why the dead have been waiting for someone like you to inherit this place. And Marcus, I am so sorry for what comes next. The camera shifted, panning away from Bernard toward the embalming table I thought was empty. A figure sat there in the darkness, motionless, waiting. Bernard's voice continued from off-screen, barely a whisper now. He's been sitting there for 6 hours, Marcus. He won't lie back down. And every 30 minutes, he says your address again, except each time he adds another detail. Your bedroom window, the crack in your bathroom mirror, the exact spot where you leave your keys. The figure on the table turned its head toward the camera, and I saw its face for the first time. It was me. Hashtag the funeral home director kept video diaries of every body. In the last one, a corpse sits up and whispers his home address. Hashtag part 2. The address burned in my mind like a brand seared into flesh. 1847 Millbrook Lane. I knew that street. Everyone in town knew that street because it was where the old Hartwell estate sat rotting at the end of a dead-end road, abandoned for 30 years since the family patriarch vanished without explanation. But that couldn't be right. No one lived there. No one had lived there for decades. I rewound the footage and watched again, my coffee growing cold, my hands trembling against the desk. The corpse, Edgar Finch, according to the toe tag visible in the frame, had been dead for 3 days when Harold filmed this particular diary. The death certificate listed natural causes: heart failure, an unremarkable end to an unremarkable life. Yet there he was, sitting up on that cold metal table, his jaw working mechanically, his eyes still clouded with the film of death, whispering an address that made no sense. I needed more context. I needed to understand what Harold had stumbled into. The external hard drives contained hundreds of additional files, organized by year, going back nearly 2 decades. I started clicking through them randomly, searching for any sign that this wasn't an isolated incident, that there was some explanation beyond what my rational mind refused to accept. The early videos were exactly what you'd expect. Harold would enter the preparation room, state the date and the name of the deceased, then methodically document his work. He'd describe the condition of the body, the requested preparations, any special instructions from the family. His voice was clinical, detached, professional. But around 2019, something changed. I found a video dated March 15th of that year. Harold looked different, thinner, with dark circles carved beneath his eyes like someone had scooped out the flesh with a spoon. His hands shook as he adjusted the camera. "This is the 4th one," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Margaret Holloway. Died Tuesday. Natural causes, they said. But she just spoke to me. She told me something about my daughter. Something she couldn't possibly know." He glanced over his shoulder at the body on the table behind him. I could see the sheet-covered form in the background, motionless, peaceful. "She said Emily is going to die on her 23rd birthday. She said it like she was reading from a calendar, like it was already written." Harold's daughter Emily had been